given that this is f of x, given that f of x is equal to 2x plus 3 and g of x is equal to 1 minus x, find in the simplest form of all of these. So before we get started, let me first introduce what composite functions mean, because that's what we'll be doing today in this video. And so first of all, when you think of the word composite, we'll know that it's something related to combining, right? And so composite functions means that we're combining two different functions together to form a new kind of equation. And so let's say we have f of x. That's a function. Now let's try f of g of x. This time we have two different functions. We have f of x, but instead of having the x, we change that into g of x. And when we have something like this, we'll need to basically substitute the function g of x inside the f of x and then just substitute that into x. And I know for now, if you don't understand what I'm saying, that's absolutely fine, but we'll be doing that and just follow along. And if you want to do the exercises yourself, you can also pause the video and try them yourselves. So yeah, basically just make sure that you know composite functions mean that we're combining different equations together. And so here, like what I showed you before, in let's say in question A, you see this f and then a tiny o and then g times x. That's basically just the same as what I showed you earlier, which is f of g of x. And so if I have f of g of x, the first step that I want to do is to substitute the g of x inside the brackets. And so if f of x is equal to 2x plus 3 and g of x is equal to 1 minus x, I want to substitute that into here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write f, put the brackets, and then substitute the whole g of x equation inside. And we know that the equation for g of x is 1 minus x. So I'm just going to put g of x as 1 minus x. Now the next step that I want to do is normally when you see f of x, anything that you put in this x, let's say f of 1, then let's say if the equation is 2x plus 1, right? And if you put x as 1, then you'll put x as 1 over here as well. And then we get 2 plus 1, which is 3. And so this is the exact same that we want to do over here on the left. Instead, we just have an unknown x, but we can just still put it in the x. So basically, we know that f of x is equal to 2x plus 3. But as I said earlier, we substituted g of x as 1 minus x. And so if f of 1 minus x is like that, then what is going to be on the other side? Well, then we have to substitute x as, instead of putting it as x, we're going to put it as 1 minus x. And then close the bracket, plus 3, because we're substituting that x into as 1 minus x. And so here we just expand. So 2 times x is negative 2x, because negative x plus 3. And then we just simplify it. So 3 plus 2 is 5 minus 2x. And there we have it. We have our answer. And this is the simplest form because it asks for the simplest form. And that's the simplest we can get. Now let's try the other one, question B. We have, this time instead of having f of g of x, we have g of f of x. So g of f of x, close bracket. Now this time we're going to do pretty much the same thing, except that we're substituting the opposite thing. And so again, the first thing that I want to do is substitute the f of x inside here. So we have g of f of x. Now what's f of x? F of x is 2x plus 3. So we have 2x plus 3, and then close the bracket. Now we have g of 2x plus 3. Now let's take a look at this equation here because we have g of x. So if 1 minus x is g of x, now I have 2x plus 3. And so what I'm going to do is substitute this into here. And so I get 1 minus, make sure to put the bracket, 2x plus 3, close the bracket. And now I just want to expand this negative sign here. So we have 1 minus 2x minus 3, because negative and positive is equal to negative. And so again, we simplify it, and we get negative 3 plus 1, which is negative 2 minus x. And there we have it. That's our answer. And I know this is a little messy, so what I'm going to do is erase everything. Erase everything here. Delete. And now let's try the last question. So we have, this time it's slightly different. Instead of having the x, we have a negative 3. But don't worry, we'll still do it the same way as we did before. So this, again, we know that this is f of g of negative 3 this time. So f of, instead of writing it as g of x, we're going to erase that x and turn it into negative 3. So again, we focus on the g of negative 3. So f of g of negative 3 is, well, let's take a look at this equation. So for now, let's just ignore the f of thing. Just focus on the g of negative 3. As I said earlier, if I see something like f equals to negative 1 is equal to 2x minus 1, then we basically just substitute that x as negative 1. And then we get something like this, and then we just simplify our answers. In this case, it's the exact same thing. We have g of negative 3. We know that g of x is 1 minus x. But now I have g of negative 3, right? So g of negative 3 is equal to 1 minus, instead of writing it as x, we're going to write it as negative 3. Sorry about that, my iPad fell just now. So yes, we have 1 minus negative 3. And now we just want to simplify this positive negative sign. We have negative negative, and that turns into positive 3. And then we get 4, because 1 plus 3 is 4. So we know that f of g of x is 4. And when I know f of 4, again, we just substitute into that equation. So I know that f of x is equal to 2x plus 3. Now I have f of 4. So then 2 times, instead of writing it as x, we write it as 4 plus 3. Here we just use basic bad math here. Multiplication first. So 4 times 2 is what? 8 plus 3. And then we get 11, because 8 plus 3 is 11. And there you have it. We have our answer here, and it's the simplest form. And so that is how you solve for composite functions and how you can combine them first. Remember, you always want to start in the middle, not in the middle, sorry. You always want to start on the inside first. So if you have something like f of g of x, make sure to substitute the g of x in and then solve for f of x. And that is how you solve for composite functions. Thank you for watching.